Should we play the track first?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. This is so hello everyone. I am Jake, producer and kind of like songwriter, based in Watford, just outside London in the UK. But I spend quite a lot of time in Hong Kong due to my wife over there, and this is my first time kind of meeting some musicy people out here. So this is great. So thanks so much, ASJ, for inviting me and having me. What I'm going to do is play a track I just released. I was going to break down the mix of that, but the session was deciding to system overload this morning loads. So instead, funnily enough, I'm going to talk a little bit about templates and actually how to help with CPU sort of problems that I should have done on the session for this track, but didn't. So yeah, I'm just going to play this track in its entirety, and then we'll break down this new track, because it's not, the new track I want to break down isn't quite finished, so it might be kind of cool to see it in progress, and I can kind of tweak some bits as we're listening to it. So yeah, this track is called Shogunai, track which I wrote most of in Hong Kong, but then decided to give it a Japanese name, which isn't really, yeah, I should have picked a Cantonese name, but I didn't. But yeah, this is my latest single. Thank you. So that track, funnily enough, had vocals written for the whole thing up until about the last stage of the mixing. It was all recorded. Only recently I've started doing more beat arranged stuff where there isn't vocals in it, because half the time I kind of sing on my songs, half the time I don't. And only recently did I really actually commit to like doing an instrumental track and putting it out. Because the mix sounded, I was really happy with it, but the song just kind of sounded shit with the vocals on it. So like right at the last minute I deleted them, and then it took about an hour for the mix to be done. But I'm actually not going to delve into that track. The track I wanted to delve into is this new track I'm doing, which this is a track with vocals on it, but this is pre-vocal. And this is actually, I have I don't know if anyone uses mix templates, but only recently did I start using mix templates, and they've kind of saved my life with like keeping like clarity on a mix. Like, so I tend to set up most of the stuff in my mix on a template. The things, you know, if you usually tend to EQ a kick drum and take out, you know, everything above 300 on it, or you tend to take everything below 300 on guitars, or etc. etc. I have all of that set up. So when I drop in the stems to do a mix, which I do, I think Evan, you were saying it was like you had a production session, then a mix session separate, right? Yeah. Again, only probably the last 4 or 5 months I've been doing that, and that's again completely helped with finishing songs and actually getting projects done instead of rewriting them when you're mixing them, because a lot of people here write and mix their own stuff. So I would like I'd get all the stems prepped in the production stage, get all the effects, whatever I needed, and you know, have it all ready, and then I bounce all them out. And again, same with effects, you need to commit to them and stuff like that, so that helps a lot. And then I'd throw it into a mix session where all of my sends are already set up, all of my plugins are primarily set up, and it kind of helps a lot of the technical stuff get out of the way with the mix. So like, at least when you throw all the stems in, it sounds somewhat good. It's kind of a blank blueprint, and it doesn't fit every song, but it kind of gets it sounding sort of pretty good for a starting point, and it kind of shouldn't. I sometimes find if I throw a song into a mix session, it suddenly sounds like crap, and then I'm deflated, and then the song just doesn't sort of, it takes me ages to get the song finished. So if I have this template set up, it kind of keeps the inspiration going a little bit. But so this session is, I have 2 templates for mixing, so I actually split it into 2 processes, mainly because to save on CPU really. So this is the second stage, which is kind of similar to what Evan was saying about the mastering. It's actually individual. I bounce out all the individual bus channels as just audio stems, so that way the CPU isn't processing any plugins or automation. And I'll quickly walk through just a little bit of kind of what I do with my mixes and see if, you know, if it's sort of interest to anyone and might kind of be useful to anybody. This is kind of what it sounds like at the moment. This is pre-vocals. The vocals are in a separate session at the moment. But yeah, here's this. This is a bit more like less beat orientated and kind of more like band kind of vibe, I guess. And only these 3 tracks at the top, they're the only actual parts of the track that aren't effects. So if I break that down, so I get 1 bus for just my bass. And with the bass, I'll usually split the same take into 2 channels, one of which I'll break the sort of bottom end of it, except like I'll shelve it at 60 so that I've got room for the sub, and then maybe I'll sort of cut it off at maybe just before 100, so I've got the bass boom of the bass guitar, and then I'll duplicate that, and then I'll use 100 and like 100 to maybe 400, and I'll distort the 100 to 400 a bit to give it a bit of character, and then I'll with the lower part of the bass, I tend to use transients to take a little bit of sustain off it, so it's got the bass doesn't get too muddy. And then you've got synths that come in here that have a bit more sub on them. And then with the drums, again, I just put that. I have 1 bus for all of that. And this session, again, I've committed to the drum levels. The only thing I've got on top of that is the actual parallel kick compression. So I can just control the kick a little bit more. So if I turn it up, I can still use that for side chaining if I need to do anything like that. But yeah, and with everything else in the track other than vocals, I put all the instruments into one bus and I mix that all. And like on this track, the instruments are pretty thin because there's so much going on here. But then I also have a lot of other send setups. So all these other tracks are sends. So I actually have a send for, if we break them down, the first one I have is a delay. Actually, we'll start with the directional one. So we have one that's just for the center, and I send sort of a variation of all sorts into that. Kick drums, bass, little bit of snares you can hear, and then I tend to take a lot of the sustain off it with transient plugin, increase a bit of attack, usually compress it, make it quite fat, just so the middle's got a good bit of punch. And then with the sides, a lot of people do two plugins for one bus channel just for the sides, but I have one for each individual. So a left and right channel. Oh yeah, and one thing with the center is I tend to take off a lot of the higher frequencies, just so you've just got that bass cutting through in the bottom. And for that, I find when I'm initially mixing the instruments or the drums or any part of the track, I can just send certain parts of the character to the center bus if I need it there. I don't have to. Once the instruments have kind of got a good solid level, I more focus on these directional buses. So you can hear there's little, bits of character there, and I might even sidechain the center bus against the side buses. So when the center bus is kind of punching, it gives a little bit of leeway on the side and gives a bit more headroom. But this is the right and left together. So there you can hear there's a little bit of snare. Again, a lot of the low frequencies have been cut off. And there's more of the synthesizers, more of the wide instruments, some of the guitars. Although it may not sound like there's many guitars in there. And that kind of adds a bit of clarity to it. I also then have I printed out the reverb. So that's probably got a bit too many low mids in it, maybe at the moment. And I've actually got a send to the kick drum, so I can maybe just so it doesn't get too muddy. If we hear that with the drums. And then another two things I really like using, is saturation. So I have about 3 channels of just different saturations just to fatten the track up at different sort of frequency points. So I've got one saturation channel here. Again, with these, I don't really think about what I send to these. I just send whatever feels right to them. And in fact, I can't even remember what saturation plugins I used on these before I bounced them. But usually I use like a Native Instruments driver, a Klang Helm compressor that's really sort of dirty, and something else. But either way, it kind of doesn't really matter with what's, whatever saturations work for you. But so these are all the saturations together. Again, they don't sound like much on their own, but they just add a little bit of crispness on top. And then I've also got a delay, which just adds a bit more room. Kind of adds something like in the same way a reverb would. But so if I play this just without any effects, and you just hear the instruments on their own. We'll skip through a bit. Like, it sounds pretty good, but then if you add these in, it adds a little bit more sauce to it. And that was the exact thing I was trying to avoid. And then I also have some more sends on here that I keep in this session. So I still have if we go to the drums, we have the drum distortion, which, James, you were talking about drum distortion a little bit, right? Parallel, yeah. So I'm a big fan of that also. So we've got that just to add a little bit of beef to it. And it's just crushed to hell. And I've got this is one of my favorite plugins at the moment, the Head Crusher by Audio Assault. It's just nasty sort of metal amp, but I tend to use it for drums a lot. And the NLS by Waves. And I just put the drive all the way up on that. Usually you're meant to use the NLS as like a router, but I just use it to add distortion really for that bus anyway. And then the other send I have is, oh yeah, the parallel. This was only something I've started using recently, but is when you have your mix bus and you have everything in that, I also send the mix bus to another channel. So I send everything to a stereo out, but I also send everything to this channel as well, which is just, or I was meant to send everything to that. Let's quickly do that now because it looks like I haven't done that. So if we get the stereo out, no, that's my time's up thing, so I'll wrap this up in a minute. Let's just have a quick look at the parallel. Yeah, this was the last thing I thought might be useful. It's really helped me is, yeah, parallel mix bus. So if we just play this on its own, essentially you just send everything in the track to this. And I mean, it's a bit too distorted, probably, if we take some of the makeup down. And maybe take a bit of drive off that. What am I using here? And that just adds a bit more like sort of girth to the track. So if we play it without, and we add it in, it's peaking a bit too much there, but you know, you might just want it really subtle down at the bottom, and yeah, adds a bit more kind of, yeah, beef to it really. So that's how I found like having all this set up already. Again, everyone has their own ways of mixing, so like this might not work for you at all, but like having all this stuff set up ready to go each time just kind of means you get the first sort of 40% of what you do out of the way, and you don't end up repeating moves. You know, if you're doing EQ moves and compression moves every session, you might as well have that already done. If obviously, you know, it all depends on your arrangement. You might have arrangements that are drastically different, and there is certain tracks I do that don't work in the template, but it kind of gets about 8 out of 10 of my mixes, 7 out of 10 of my mixes done a lot quicker. And I also think when you're actually sending to the buses, you don't, you know, if you kind of know where you need to send everything, you don't need to necessarily listen to the track for a good half an hour while you're sending it all, which just gives you a bit of breathing space from the track, and then you'll listen to it and it should sound a bit better, and then you can just sort of tweak whatever problems are there as they are there. But yeah, given that my little timer has gone off, I think that is me. But yeah, thank you for having me, and thanks to you for listening.
Thanks, Jake, for sharing. So now it's Calvin T's turn. Yes.